When you wake up in the morning, the first decision you make sets the tone for your entire day. The billionaire's brain and your brain are built the same way, same neurons, same structure, same potential. The difference lies in how those brains are being used every single morning. One brain is trained, disciplined, and conditioned to seek growth, while the other may be distracted, reactive, and chained by habits that drain energy. Think about this. The billionaire's brain doesn't wake up and scroll endlessly on a phone. It doesn't begin the day feeding on chaos. Instead, it wakes with intention. It follows a routine that strengthens clarity, energy, and focus. While many people roll over and check notifications, the billionaire is already moving, already aligning their body and mind toward vision and purpose. The truth is, it isn't luck. It isn't privilege alone. It is consistency built over years, starting from mornings most people waste. Focus is the currency of success. Your brain can focus like a billionaire's brain if you train it to, but here's the problem. Your brain might be addicted, not just to substances, but to distraction, comfort, or short bursts of dopamine that come from like scrolling or meaningless entertainment. That addiction robs you of your power. Billionaires train their brains to crave progress, to chase long-term reward instead of short-term pleasure. They master focus the way others master distraction. When you feed your brain with discipline, your mind becomes sharper. When you repeat a powerful morning routine, reading, exercising, journaling, planning, you wire your brain for victory. When you eliminate toxic addictions, whether it's social media, procrastination, or negative thinking, you create space for clarity and creativity to dominate. That's when your brain starts functioning at a billionaire level. The truth is, you don't need a billionaire's money to think like one. You need their habits, their discipline, their focus. The separation between where you are and where they are is not impossible to cross. It is built on small daily choices, especially the choices you make in the first hour of your day. So ask yourself, are you training your brain like a billionaire? Or are you feeding it like a prisoner of distraction? Your future is hidden in your routine. Your power is hidden in your focus. Your freedom is found when you break free from addiction and teach your brain to align with greatness. When we talk about the difference between a billionaire's brain and the average person's brain, one of the clearest dividing lines is the way mornings are used, because mornings are the foundation upon which the entire day is built. The moment you wake up, your brain is fresh, your mind is uncluttered, and your body is at its most receptive state. But how you choose to direct those first moments determines whether you are building momentum or losing it before the day has even started. Billionaires understand this truth and guard their mornings with an almost sacred discipline. They rise early, not by accident, but by design, because the early hours are quiet, undisturbed, and allow them to focus on the essentials without distraction. While most people begin their day reacting to alarms, notifications, and news feeds, billionaires begin their day by setting the tone, controlling their environment, and deciding in advance what their mind and body will focus on. This is not just about waking up early, but about using the early hours intentionally. The power of a morning routine lies in the compounding effect it creates over time. If you spend the first hour of every day on activities that sharpen your body, feed your mind, and align your spirit, you are programming your brain for success. Reading something inspiring or educational, writing down goals, exercising to energize the body, practicing gratitude or visualization, all of these are simple acts on the surface, but they stack together to create an unstoppable mindset. Billionaires know that the morning is when the brain is most capable of absorbing new ideas, connecting patterns, and setting a rhythm of discipline that echoes throughout the day. In contrast, the average person often spends the morning scrambling, rushing, or indulging in distractions that provide no real nourishment for the mind or body. The result is a reactive day where focus is scattered and productivity is low. Think about the difference between a brain that is nourished with positivity, movement, and clarity at 6 a.m. and a brain that is exhausted by scrolling negative news or hitting the snooze button multiple times. One brain is primed for growth, while the other is set up for survival mode. The billionaire's brain uses mornings to build confidence, resilience, and vision, while the distracted brain uses mornings to feed fear, comparison, and laziness. Over months and years, these small choices in the first hour of the day create massive differences in wealth, health, relationships, and opportunities. That is why so many high achievers say the morning is their secret weapon, because it is the time when the brain is most plastic, most moldable, and most powerful if trained correctly. Another important element to notice is that billionaires guard their mornings not only from distractions, but also from other people's priorities. They do not allow emails, calls, or demands from others to dictate the start of their day. They create before they consume, they move before they respond, and they build before they allow others to pull their attention away. This habit is what gives them the space to think long term and make decisions with clarity instead of being caught in the endless cycle of reaction. The average person, on the other hand, often spends mornings putting out fires, answering messages, and giving their best mental energy to things that do not build their own vision. Over time, this weakens focus, drains energy, and cements habits of reactivity. The beauty of this truth is that it is available to everyone. Human brain, whether billionaire or beginner, has the same potential. The difference is how it is programmed daily. If you design a powerful morning routine and commit to it with discipline, your brain starts to function differently. It learns to prioritize, to focus, to resist distraction, and to tap into higher creativity. The billionaire's brain is not some rare gift. It is a reflection of repeated choices. And the first choice each day begins with how you spend your morning. Focus is the one currency that every human being has been given in equal measure, but the way it is spent separates those who achieve extraordinary results from those who remain stuck in mediocrity. A billionaire's brain is not inherently superior. It is simply trained to invest focus in areas that create long-term value. When you observe the habits of billionaires, you notice how relentlessly they protect their attention from being scattered because they understand that diluted focus leads to diluted results. The average person spends the day pulled in multiple directions, jumping from social media to emails to conversations to meaningless tasks, never allowing the brain to fully immerse itself in one powerful activity. This constant switching weakens the ability to go deep. And without depth, there can be no mastery, no innovation, and no breakthroughs. Billionaires, however, discipline themselves to cut away the noise and channel their focus like a laser on what matters. The science of focus shows that the human brain can only deeply concentrate on a limited number of things at a time. Yet we often sabotage ourselves by trying to multitask. Billionaires know that multitasking is a myth when it comes to quality, so they prefer single tasking with intensity. If they are in a meeting, they are fully present. If they are reading, they are absorbing. If they are creating, they shut out the world to give themselves the gift of immersion. This kind of deep work is what produces the kind of clarity and decision making that drives billion-dollar companies forward. Meanwhile, an unfocused brain wastes its best energy on trivial notifications and endless distractions that produce no real return. It is not that billionaires have more hours in the day. It is that they use the same 24 hours with a focus that compounds into wealth and influence. Focus is also tied to energy because where your focus goes, your energy flows. Billionaires carefully guard their mental and physical energy by aligning their focus with their values and priorities. They know that saying yes to everything is the fastest way to drain the brain and weaken clarity, so they master the art of saying no. They reject distractions not because they are rude, but because they know what they are building requires absolute commitment. The average person, however, says yes to almost everything. Social invitations, irrelevant tasks, and constant digital interruptions, leaving them exhausted and unfocused by the time real work needs to be done. The result is that their brain learns to thrive on shallow focus and instant gratification, while the billionaire's brain thrives on sustained focus and delayed gratification. Training the brain for focus is like training a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger it becomes. Billionaires often practice mindfulness, meditation, journaling, or other rituals that teach their brains to return to the present moment quickly when distractions appear. They build an environment that supports focus, organized spaces, quiet hours, minimalistic digital setups, because they know the brain is easily influenced by its surroundings. The average person, on the other hand, allows clutter, noise, and constant pings to dominate their environment, and then wonders why focus feels impossible. The truth is, focus is not just about willpower. It is about designing conditions that make it easier for the brain to concentrate deeply without resistance. Another dimension of focus is the ability to prioritize. Billionaires do not focus on everything. They focus on the few things that move the needle. They apply the 820 principle ruthlessly, knowing that a small percentage of their activities will generate the majority of their results. They are willing to let go of good opportunities in order to pursue great ones. The average brain, however, often spreads itself thin, trying to do everything at once and ending up with half-finished projects and wasted time. The billionaire's brain is comfortable with focus because it understands the power of trade-offs, while the average brain is fearful of missing out and therefore chases too many things at once. Ultimately, the currency of focus is available to all of us. Every morning, every hour, every moment, we make a choice about where to direct our attention. A billionaire's results are simply the compounded effect of years of disciplined focus on vision, growth, and creation, while most people's lack of results is the compounded effect of years of distracted attention. The good news is that the brain is plastic. It can be rewired, reshaped, and retrained to focus like a billionaire's brain if we are willing to cut away distractions, practice deep work, and direct our attention toward what truly matters. Addiction is one of the most underestimated forces that shapes the brain, the body, and the future. And it is not limited to substances like alcohol or drugs. In today's world, addiction often comes in subtler and more socially acceptable forms, scrolling endlessly through social media, binge watching shows, constantly checking notifications, indulging in junk food, or procrastinating on important work. These patterns might seem harmless in the moment, but they are training the brain to crave constant stimulation, to seek short-term pleasure at the cost of long-term achievement. The billionaire's brain operates differently because it is trained to resist these temptations and addictions, not by accident, but by intention. It is not that billionaires never feel the pull of distraction or comfort, but they have built systems and disciplines that help them master their impulses instead of becoming slaves to them. The core of addiction is the brain's reward system. Every time you check your phone for likes, eat something sugary, or escape into entertainment, your brain gets a hit of dopamine, the chemical of pleasure. The more you indulge, the more your brain demands, and over time the cycle becomes automatic. Billionaires understand that this same dopamine system can be redirected. Instead of rewarding their brain with empty habits, they train it to feel pleasure from progress, from building, from creating, from achieving. They build routines that condition their brain to associate satisfaction with growth rather than with distraction. This rewiring doesn't happen overnight, but through repetition and discipline, the billionaire's brain learns to reject quick dopamine hits and instead crave the deeper fulfillment that comes from meaningful success. When you compare how an addicted brain and a disciplined brain function, the difference becomes stark. The addicted brain wakes up and reaches for a device, already feeding the cycle of distraction. It spends the day jumping from one dopamine spike to another, never finding the mental stillness to think deeply or create something valuable. The disciplined brain, on the other hand, begins the day by feeding itself with activities that strengthen focus and clarity. It resists the urge to indulge in shallow pleasures because it has been trained to see those as obstacles rather than rewards. This distinction explains why one brain produces billion-dollar ideas and the other spends hours consuming content that builds nothing. Addiction also steals time, and time is the one resource that cannot be replenished. A billionaire's brain understands this truth at a profound level. They see time as the most valuable currency, so they refuse to waste it on addictive cycles that yield no return. The average brain, however, often falls into the trap of just 5 more minutes of scrolling, which quickly becomes hours lost. Over days, weeks, and years, those hours compound into wasted opportunities, unrealized potential, and a life shaped by distraction rather than intention. Addiction is expensive not in money, but in energy, focus, and possibility. Breaking free from it is not just about self-control, but about reclaiming the future. One of the reasons addiction is so powerful is because it feels good in the moment. It is easier to stay comfortable than to challenge yourself, easier to scroll than to build, easier to indulge than to sacrifice. But billionaires know that comfort is the enemy of growth. They practice delayed gratification, choosing short-term discipline over short-term pleasure because they know the long-term rewards are far greater. They replace addictive habits with constructive rituals that serve their vision. Instead of consuming endlessly, they create. Instead of numbing themselves, they challenge themselves. Instead of running from discomfort, they use discomfort as fuel for transformation. The hopeful truth is that the brain is not permanently wired for addiction. Neuroplasticity means you can retrain your brain to form new pathways, to crave different things, to break cycles of weakness and replace them with cycles of strength. Every time you resist an addictive behavior, you weaken its hold. Every time you choose a constructive habit, you strengthen a new pattern. Over time, just as billionaires have done, your brain can shift from being addicted to distraction to being addicted to growth. This transformation is possible for anyone willing to recognize addiction for what it is, not just a personal weakness, but a barrier standing between you and your highest potential. Habits are the invisible architecture of the brain, silently shaping the way a person thinks, acts, and creates results. And this truth explains why two people with the same potential can live entirely different lives. Billionaires and ordinary people are not born with different kinds of brains, but over time, habits carve pathways that determine what each brain becomes capable of achieving. Every repeated action wires neurons together, strengthening certain circuits while weakening others, and those circuits eventually become automatic responses. This is why habits are so powerful. They operate beneath conscious awareness, driving behavior without needing constant decision-making. Billionaires understand this at a deep level, which is why they intentionally design routines that serve their vision, while many people allow habits to form by default, often reinforcing cycles of distraction, procrastination, or mediocrity. The brain is always learning and adapting, and the habits you practice daily are the lessons you are teaching it. If you consistently wake up early, exercise, and review your goals, your brain learns discipline, clarity, and focus. If you consistently hit snooze, check your phone immediately, or avoid difficult tasks, your brain learns laziness, distraction, and avoidance. These lessons compound over time, and eventually they dictate the quality of your life. Billionaires discipline their brains by repeating behaviors that align with their highest priorities, and as those behaviors become automatic, their success feels natural. The average person, however, often underestimates the long-term effect of small daily actions, not realizing that skipping one workout, one plan, or 1 hour of focus is not just a single event, but a signal to the brain about what kind of habit to strengthen. Habits also shape identity, because the actions you repeat are the story you tell yourself about who you are. A person who wakes up early and writes every day begins to see themselves as a disciplined and creative individual, while someone who wastes mornings on distractions begins to see themselves as unmotivated or unfocused. Billionaires leverage this identity loop by creating habits that reinforce empowering identities. They see themselves as builders, leaders, creators, and every repeated action supports its story. Ordinary people sometimes fall into the opposite loop, creating habits that reinforce a weaker identity, which then justifies continuing the same behaviors. This cycle can be broken, but it requires intentionality in choosing which habits to keep and which ones to replace. The separation between billionaire-level habits and average-level habits is often subtle in the moment, but massive over years. Writing down goals daily may take 5 minutes, but after a year it produces clarity and consistency that shapes major decisions. Reading 30 minutes of a valuable book may feel small, but after a decade it results in knowledge that compounds into wisdom and innovation. Exercising every morning might only burn a few hundred calories, but the discipline it builds affects energy, confidence, and resilience for a lifetime. On the other hand, spending those same minutes scrolling through endless feeds or indulging in distractions produces nothing but wasted time and weakened focus. Both brains have the same time, but the difference lies in the habits chosen and repeated without fail. Another powerful truth about habits is that they free the brain's energy. Decision fatigue is real. The more decisions you have to make, the weaker your focus becomes. Billionaires remove this burden by turning their most important actions into automatic habits, so they no longer need willpower to do them. They do not debate whether to exercise, plan, or focus. They have trained their brain to do it without question. This leaves their mental energy available for creative and strategic thinking, while the average person exhausts themselves debating simple choices like when to wake up, what to work on first, or whether to commit to their plans. The automation of good habits is one of the most underrated secrets behind extraordinary achievement. Habits are not chains but tools, and the brain will follow whichever ones are most consistently repeated. If destructive habits can shape a life of limitation, then constructive habits can build a life of limitless possibility. The challenge is to stop living on autopilot and start choosing habits with intention, because the future is hidden in the routines of today, and the brain will always become a reflection of the habits it is fed. A delayed gratification is one of the greatest distinctions between the way a billionaire's brain functions and the way most people allow their brains to operate, because at its core, success is about trading what feels good in the moment for what creates exponential rewards in the future. The brain is wired to seek comfort, to avoid pain, and to chase quick rewards, but billionaires learn to rewire this instinct and use it to their advantage. They understand that every choice is a trade-off between short-term pleasure and long-term gain, and they discipline themselves to repeatedly choose the option that aligns with their vision, even when it is uncomfortable. The average person, however, often falls into the trap of instant gratification, making choices that feel rewarding now but cost heavily later in terms of time, energy, money, and potential. The billionaire's brain has learned to tolerate the discomfort of sacrifice because it recognizes the greater reward waiting on the other side. When you look at how delayed gratification works in practice, you see it in the way billionaires manage money, time, and energy. Instead of spending every dollar they earn, they invest it knowing that wealth multiplies with patience. Instead of filling their calendars with shallow activities that provide temporary amusement, they dedicate their time to projects and people that build something lasting. Instead of chasing quick dopamine hits from distractions, they channel their focus into deep work that compounds into extraordinary results. Every act of discipline is an investment into a future payoff, and every act of indulgence is a withdrawal from that future. Over years, these investments and withdrawals separate those who live with abundance from those who struggle with scarcity. Psychology has long studied the concept of delayed gratification, most famously in experiments like the marshmallow test, where children were given the option to eat one treat immediately or wait a short period and receive two. The results showed that those who waited tended to have better outcomes later in life in areas such as health, relationships, and finances. Billionaires essentially master the adult version of this test every day. They are constantly surrounded by opportunities to indulge in comfort, distraction, or easy pleasures, yet they train themselves to wait, to endure, and to pursue the bigger prize. This discipline of mind allows them to build empires while others chase fleeting pleasures that leave nothing behind. One of the hidden strengths of delayed gratification is that it builds resilience and patience. By resisting the urge for immediate satisfaction, the brain learns endurance. It becomes more comfortable with waiting, more able to handle discomfort, and more willing to engage in the long game. Billionaires rely on this mental toughness because the projects they pursue often take years or decades to bear fruit. Without the ability to delay gratification, they would quit too soon or settle for less. The average person, however, often gives up when results don't appear quickly, allowing impatience to rob them of the rewards that come only to those who persist. The billionaire's brain thrives because it knows that patience is not passive. It is an active discipline that multiplies the impact of every effort. It is also worth noting that delayed gratification is not about denying yourself forever, but about shifting the timing of reward. Billionaires still enjoy life, but they earn the right to enjoy it by first securing their foundation. They focus first on building wealth, health, and freedom, and then they indulge, often on a far greater scale than those who chose immediate pleasures. The average person often reverses this order, chasing indulgence before building stability, which creates cycles of debt, stress, and regret. The ability to flip this sequence is one of the defining factors of lasting success because the brain learns to prioritize the future self over the present impulse. Every moment of decision presents a choice between instant gratification and delayed gratification, between short-term comfort and long-term vision. Each time the brain chooses discipline over indulgence, it becomes stronger, more focused, and more capable of pursuing greatness. Each time it chooses indulgence over discipline, it becomes weaker, more distracted, and more addicted to short-term rewards. The billionaire's brain is simply the product of thousands of repeated choices to delay gratification, while the average brain is often the product of thousands of repeated choices to take the easy way out. This difference compounds invisibly at first, but eventually it becomes visible in results so large that people call it luck or genius, when in reality it was discipline and patience all along. The most empowering truth about the human brain is that it can be rewired, reshaped, and retrained no matter where you are starting from. And this is the final distinction between a billionaire's brain and the average brain. The structure of the brain is the same for everyone, built with billions of neurons capable of forming new connections at any age. What separates outcomes is not biology, but the choices that shape those neural pathways over time. Neuroplasticity is the scientific term for this adaptability, and it means that the brain you have today does not have to be the brain you live with tomorrow. Every thought, every habit, every focus, And every routine is literally sculpting the wiring of your brain, and billionaires understand this in practice, using it to condition themselves for discipline, creativity, and resilience, while most people unknowingly condition themselves for distraction, procrastination, and comfort. Rewiring the brain begins with awareness, because you cannot change what you do not notice. Billionaires cultivate a high level of self-awareness, constantly reflecting on their habits, thoughts, and patterns. They notice when their focus drifts, when distractions creep in, when addictions start to form, and they act quickly to replace those patterns with stronger ones. The average person often lives unconsciously, repeating cycles without questioning them, and in doing so, they strengthen neural circuits that work against their goals. Awareness allows billionaires to interrupt negative loops and deliberately form positive ones, which over time become automatic. This is how small improvements repeated consistently lead to massive long-term transformation. The process of rewiring also involves environment, because the brain is heavily influenced by the spaces, people, and stimuli around it. Billionaires design their environments to make success easier and distraction harder. They surround themselves with other driven people, keep their workspaces clean and focused, minimize unnecessary noise, and set up systems that encourage discipline. By contrast, the average person often allows their environment to control them instead of shaping it intentionally. Cluttered spaces, negative influences, and constant notifications reinforce the wrong patterns in the brain. By shifting the environment, anyone can accelerate the rewiring process and make discipline feel natural rather than forced. Another key element of rewiring is repetition. The brain learns through practice, and the more often a behavior is repeated, the stronger the neural connections become. Billionaires repeat their morning routines, their focus rituals, their strategic thinking sessions, and their physical training, not because they are always motivated, but because they know repetition is what creates automaticity. Eventually, these practices no longer require conscious effort. They become second nature. The average brain resists repetition, craving novelty and variety, but in doing so, it never gives itself the chance to form strong circuits of discipline. Success is built on the unglamorous repetition of simple but powerful actions until they become part of who you are. Emotion also plays a critical role in rewiring the brain. Billionaires attach strong meaning to their habits, linking them to their deepest values and vision. They do not exercise just to look good. They exercise because it fuels their performance and longevity. They do not read just for entertainment. They read to expand their mental models and improve decision making. By attaching purpose to action, they create emotional reinforcement that strengthens neural pathways. The average person often disconnects action from purpose, doing things out of obligation or avoiding them out of boredom, which weakens consistency. When actions are tied to vision and meaning, the brain wires them more deeply and holds onto them longer. The ability to rewire the brain is ultimately about reclaiming power. It means you are not a prisoner of your past habits, addictions, or distractions. It means that even if you have wasted years in cycles of comfort or procrastination, you can begin today to create new circuits of focus, resilience, and creativity. Billionaires are not superhuman. They are simply individuals who took control of their brain's wiring instead of leaving it to chance. By choosing routines that strengthen discipline, by practicing focus until it becomes natural, by resisting addiction and replacing it with growth, they have turned the same raw material that everyone has into an extraordinary tool for creation and influence. The same opportunity exists for anyone who decides to consciously rewire their brain and take ownership of its incredible power.